everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbaloye in Lagos. Last week, the news was filled with a lot of interesting stories, controversies upon controversies. But today, we've been reporting that the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Tanko Muhammad, has directed the Judicial Service Committee of the FCT Abuja to immediately initiate disciplinary action against the Upper Area Court judge who issued direct criminal summons against the Anambra State Abga governorship candidate Professor Chukwuma Soludo. The directive was issued to the JSC under the chairmanship of the acting chief judge of the FCC, Justice Hosseini Yusuf Baba, last week, and this was confirmed to Channels Television by the spokesperson of the ANJC, Soji Oye. The past days also have seen debates on value-added tax, VAT, and the controversies, as some state governments have gone to court to challenge the right and the powers and the capacity of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the FRS, of collecting, and the federal government's capacity, or what they call the issue of equity for distributing the VAT. The right will get what and how it's been distributed has been called to question in the past days. Tonight we start our conversation with someone you know too well, a former vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the 2019 presidential election, and a former governor of Anambra State, Mr. Peter Obi, who joins us from Ikoyi area of Lagos. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for joining us tonight. The VAT matter has been in the news, and there's been a lot of debate. I know you've spoken about the issue of federalism, how states need to be administered, the kind of wealth and how it should be distributed. Issues of revenue come to the table, and you have participated in those kind of conversations in the last few years. But let's begin the conversation with you tonight by getting to know your view on this matter. They have drawn up the issue of fiscal federalism and how the constituent units can administer the wealth that is being distributed or generated in their own territory. Let me get your view. What is your opinion on the issue of VAT and the conversation that has been generated on our in the state of our federalism?
Well, sir, thank you very much for inviting me this evening, and I thank you, viewers and everything. Also, so for me, I've said you just mentioned about my own stand on issue of fiscal federalism. It hasn't changed because it will make the country productive. Whatever this issue, such controversies come up. What bothers me is that the country is concentrating on sharing. Every time it is about sharing. Nobody's talking about how to generate the income, how to make more money. Nobody's talking about production. The country is not productive. That is why we are preoccupied by sharing. If we are productive, it will be very easy, for the country to grow, be able to create jobs, do what other countries are doing. It is all about sharing and not sharing this and everything. Every part of this country have the potentials to grow and compete with the other. And because we're not doing that, well, I don't want to make so much comment on VAT. It's a matter that is in court.
Yeah, so that's why because I know it's sub judice, but of course this is an issue that has been debated over the past days. And in fact, when you were in government, I remember these kind of conversations have come up. What the federal government, what belongs to the federal government, what belongs to the state, and how it can be distributed. Your own state, Anambra State, has recently been identified as an oil producing state. These are some of the issues that come up when we're talking about the sharing of wealth. And that's why I brought about what, again, people are saying. Nigerians are saying, look, when we're talking about restructuring, these are issues that are being highlighted as part of things that we need to think about in getting our nation forward. Do you think it's the right way to go? I mean, when state challenge federal government's capacity, is it some kind of restructuring from your own standpoint?
Well, like I said, even like you mentioned about Anambra being admitted for a producing state, that's good. But let me tell you, shale oil is a dead asset. With the plans we had in place, even before I left office, if it was followed by 2030, Anambra will probably be generating more money than Nigeria will generate from oil. Because when you talk about this oil, how much are we getting from oil? $18 billion. That's all we are getting from oil. You can't compare it with what other smaller states are getting from little or no investment. All they have done is to be able to invest in education, in ICT, in health, in everything. If you do this investment properly, pull your people out of poverty, you will see that the money you're talking, in terms of what we're going to get from oil, I don't see Anambra State generating from oil, even in the next 10 years, assuming they start today, they will never be able to generate about $500 million. But I can tell you, if Anambra State is able to key in with what we started, where we are targeting to raise about $1 to $2 billion by the year 2030, and be able to distribute and support SMEs across the states, where there's massive industrialization of the state, and exports will be generating 5-6 times that. I believe in physical federalism. It will help the country to grow. At this point, the country is not growing, productivity is very low.
You said the country is not going. I mean, you're trying to say economically, but if you look at it, there was a report by the
Yes.
NBS that.
And otherwise.
Okay, so let's take it one after the other. So there was a recent report by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics that reported a 5% growth, which is double, in fact, more than double of what experts had predicted at the same time. And when you say it has not grown, GDP, isn't it a measure of growth of one's economy, especially a country that just got out of a recession and a deadly pandemic that almost crippled the economy of most countries of the world?
That is compared to a minus 6%. Where that 5% is being compared to a minus 6% of the same quarter of 2000. And if you look at that growth, it's driven by, number one, transport. Because you have a total lockdown last year, there was no movement, there was no transportation. Now you're opening up, there's transportation. And then you look at it again, it's ICT. Because of the issues of pandemic and everything, there's a boom in ICT because people are now using Zoom, everything for meeting. It's not growth. It's not growth that it needs celebration, because it's not creating jobs. It's not increasing your per capita. It's not increasing this. You could look at it. I can say there's no growth that added to your GDP or your per capita. So it is just a growth that you're coming from a minus, and you've been able to come to a level ground. If you measure it, if you look at what has happened in the country in terms of your revenue for this year, look at your own ratios, you find out that you're not doing well. And they're very simple.
So, in essence, you said we shouldn't rejoice so much about this growth. But I want us to take it first and foremost from the point of where we are coming from and now where we are. Especially when experts have said we can't get more than 2% or 2.5%. But the economy did better than that, up to 5%. Isn't these a sign or a signal to a better days ahead? Or perhaps, just a moment, Your Excellency.
Growth added nothing, it didn't.
No, just a moment. Let me land on that question, sir. The question I'm asking is that if experts have said we might not experience, at the period that it was measured, that we cannot experience more than 2% or at most 2.5% of GDP growth, but we did as much as 5%. And we are coming from a 2020 of pandemic. Now we're coming from a 2019 where we experienced recession, a second one in about 6 years. And we're looking forward to a brighter year, and GDP growth has come up to about 5%. So the question is, isn't this a signal or a sign of better days ahead?
So you cannot use 1 quarter of economic growth to measure what is happening. I've told you, this is a growth coming from a minus, so you wait till further reports of other quarterly reports, and you can measure whether you're in the right direction. And you have to look at it, whether are you creating jobs? Are people living better life? Are their lives better today? Are your people, these are the things that measure growth. Today, the average Nigerian spends over 100% of his income on food alone, on feeding. These are things, they're things that gives you real growth. Growth that is measurable, growth that is creating jobs, people are happier and everything, and the disposable income are increasing. This is why you measure growth. But just a temporary growth in figures, whether it's by experts or by this, is not something to celebrate. If you look at the real fundamentals of your budget this year, the amount of money you're borrowing and everything, you will see that things are still very dear.
So what can we do? What would you advise that we focus on right now to experience a brighter day from the figure that we've gotten and where we should be? What should we be doing as a nation?
So in investing, you're not investing in the right direction. The country is not investing in the right direction. And I give you words to show you that we're still in problems. If you look at the first, call it 5 months of this year, let me just take from January to May to show you our revenue expectation was 2.7 trillion. That's our revenue expectation. Our actual revenue was 1,845,000,000,000 when we're expecting 2,766,000,000,000. Our expenditure within that period was 4,857,000,000,000. Our debt servicing, which was supposed to be about 2.8 trillion, moved to about 300 to 3 trillion. Our borrowing to support that expenditure, because you generated only 1,845,000,000, but your expenditure was 4.8, so you borrowed about 3. Our debt servicing within that period was 1,820,000,000. So your income was 1,845,000,000, and you spent 1,802,000,000 in debt servicing. This is not debt repayment. Within these 5 months, in our sinking fund, not 1 naira entered into it, when we're supposed to have almost 100 billion in that sinking fund. So you're not even putting away money to pay this debt, and you're borrowing more. And this money you're borrowing is not, nobody can say this is where we're investing it in order to be able tomorrow to repay or service this debt. You ask what should we be doing? We need to be investing in the proper components for development, in health, in education, and pulling people out of poverty. And that includes tangible and intangible assets. You just talk about GDP growing, and I told you that the components that is supposed to make it, to show that it's real growth, are declining. Our biggest GDP contributor today is agriculture. Go and look at that report. Agriculture was not growing. People can't go to their farms today because of insecurity. Food items and everything have doubled in price. Your people are getting more hungry. The salaries can't pay for food items, like I said before. Nigerians now spend over 100% of their salary to eat. So these are things you need to invest in the proper thing. You need to look at your intangible assets, security, law and order, and all this, and deal with it. Otherwise, you're not doing anything.
Let's talk about specifics, and I'll still come back to some of the components that which you took up. But I drew an inference from what you said earlier about the borrowings and how much it will take in our yearly budget to service those debts and the sinking funds and some of the other components of our yearly budget. But let's focus a bit more on the issue of the debt and the burden that Nigeria bears presently compared to what we have seen, at least in the last 5 years. It does look like you're really not in favor of borrowings. You have a problem with borrowings. Do you support borrowing or you do not?
China, I'm surprised you're asking me this because everybody knows my stand on borrowing. There's nothing wrong in borrowing. China, if you look at all the G7, G12, G20, even call it any developing nation, they support their development by borrowing, even individual businesses. But are you borrowing for productivity or are you borrowing for consumption? My worry here is that we're borrowing for consumption. And that is, for me, is a no-no.
What do you mean by borrowing for consumption?
Must be for
Governor Obi, what do you mean by borrowing for consumption?
So we have done this analysis that it doesn't need to be told. It's a very simple thing. So if you borrow money and you did not invest it, for example, since you want me to explain on it, I've done this before, let me do it again. So your GDP in 2015 is about 500. Your per capita is about 2,500. You've borrowed, as at that time you were owing about, your debt was about 10 trillion. Today, your debt, Shehun, is about 30-something trillion, and your GDP is now 400, your per capita is now 2,000. You're a businessman. You borrowed money and put it in business, and the value of your business is collapsing. That means you borrowed for consumption. Straightforward. If you invested it, it would have changed. You would have seen growth in your GDP,
Yeah,
growth in your per capita.
Apologies.
You create more jobs and everything.
Apologies to cut in quickly. If you look at some of the borrowings, especially the ones from China, there are specific projects that the federal government said they have borrowed for. For example, in the construction of rail services in the nation. Well, from what you have said, some people also will argue that the borrowings didn't start today, that even from the days of when your party was in power, the borrowings have started.
So I'm not talking about who borrowed the money. I don't want to be, I'm not in, this is not politics. I'm not talking about who borrowed the money. I'm talking about that you're borrowing for wrong reason. If you borrow for consumption, it doesn't matter whether it was borrowed by PDP or APC. I don't want to go into that, because if I go into that, somebody borrowed more and wasted it. But the borrowing for consumption, this is what is wrong. Whenever we're talking about issues, people are talking to, putting it into politics. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking that the country as a nation is not productive, and there's nothing wrong in borrowing. And if you're borrowing, it shouldn't be for consumption. That's why more and more people are getting poorer. You just told me about GDP growth. The question is, GDP is growing, but your people are getting poorer. More and more people are losing their job. That means you're not growing. So what I want to see is growth that will put people out of poverty, growth that will make people have disposable income and be able to feed themselves, growth that will educate our children. These are the growth that makes money. Growth that will be able to provide health, primary health care for people in communities and everything. These are critical areas we want to go into. Not growth that just speculates and people are celebrating in TV and everything. I want to see it in communities. When I visit them, people are happy because they're getting more income and they're seeing their children in school and everything. That is growth. I've served this country in my little capacity. I could see what it means for people to be in a situation where they're being served well.
But I mean, Governor Peter Obi, what would you do differently if you had the opportunity to be in charge?
I've told you that one is that the country needs to stop borrowing. I said investment. We will borrow money and invest it in productive sector.
Can you give us specifics here? Specifics of where the investment will go into.
Where do you think you can pull people out of poverty from? The biggest engine of employer all over the world is micro, small, medium enterprises. That is the engine everywhere. And it's very straightforward. That engine today is not being supported in Nigeria. Nigeria have a total of 40 million SMEs. 40 million SMEs. Call it even 30 something. So even on this, there is no properly articulated fiscal and monetary policy to support this. The entire loan, or call it credit, to private sector in Nigeria now is about 30 trillion naira. Less than 1.5 trillion is going to this sector. Less than 5% of the entire loan. No other country that I've studied is that low. No other country. That means you're not supporting your engine of growth. This is, if you go to any country, even developed countries like UK and America, the biggest employer of labor is this sector that I mentioned. Go to Bangladesh, go to India, go to China, go to Philippines. I can go even in Ghana. They're not supporting it. So we have to have a physical monetary policies that will invest in this engine of growth in order to create jobs.
All right. So you mentioned monetary policy now.
Today,
so,
when we talk about Nigeria,
yeah, you mentioned the monetary policy. We are due for break in about a minute and a half. I'd like you to quickly touch on that. Recently, the CBN banned the sales of forex to bureau de change, and there has been reaction to that issue. Since you mentioned the issue of monetary policy, I'd like to get your view on that stand of the CBN.
well, let me tell you again, all this haphazard situation is not what the country should focus on. We should focus on generating more foreign exchange, so we don't start all this haphazard situation where we find ourselves. It is easy for us to organize ourselves to focus on this sector I told you, to generate more exports. Nigeria can produce more and export more, and it's easier for you to invest in education and have more diaspora that will bring in more money. Let me use Bangladesh, a country as big as ours. Bangladesh generates from textiles about $35 billion. That is twice what we earn from oil. For textile, they have over 5,000 textile companies, call it tailoring companies, scattered all over the place. And these are small companies that I mentioned before, small and medium companies manufacturing garments for the world, 35 billion, and we make from oil 18 billion. Look at your overseas diaspora. How many people today do you have that you can say live in diaspora? Maybe about 5 million, because officially the United Nations is 1.2 million, but call it, as I'll say, it's about 5 million. And they are they're repatriating or remitting, as you can call it, about 25 billion. So they're even giving you more money than oil. And you have a population of 200 million. Egypt, with half of your population, is already receiving over 30 billion. Philippines, with half of your population, is generating over 40 billion. Even Bangladesh now have overtaken Nigeria in terms of that one. Educate these people. Put money into education. They will go all over the world. We can double. Nigeria can easily, in the next 10 years to 15 years, with proper investment in education, double its diaspora citizens and be able to double its income. It's clear now, you know, the world is going to be shortage of 10 million nurses and midwives in the next 10 years. They're going to have 25 million ICT workers in the next 10 years. These are well-established facts. Why don't you invest in this area? That's what Philippines is doing. That's what Bangladesh is doing. Invest there and make sure that we'll get 10% of this number of people. If we're able to get 3.5 million people in diaspora today, remitting additional $5,000 every year, which some of them will do more, you have 17-point-something billion. So why don't we look at how to generate money for the future, rather than just stay here and be saying you're looking for people who wants to buy BTA? These things are pedestrian. This country have passed this stage. We can do better.
Governor, we're due for a break, but we will come back and get your thoughts on a few issues before we wrap up the conversation with you. Let's take a break, everyone. And when we return, I'll find a moment with Mr. Peter Obi, the former governor of Anambra State, and afterwards, Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu will join us, a former House of Reps minority leader on the state of the nation. Where are we headed from here? Join us again, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. A former governor of Anambra State and the former vice presidential candidate of the PDP in the 2019 presidential election, former Governor Peter Obi, has been speaking with us. Our closing moments with you now. You touched on the issue of health, which I think is very critical. I like you because you mentioned areas that Nigeria need to invest in. I'd like to take you quickly on those areas before we close with you. And that's health, education. Probably we take one question on politics before we close. So quickly on the issue of health. You're mentioning how much the world will need nurses and midwives, because I was reading the other day that you donated some money to some nursing school. But beyond this handout, doctors in Nigeria are wanting to go to Saudi Arabia. It's been reported in the news how they were doing interviews and doing examination to get jobs in the UK and Saudi Arabia. How do we stop this brain drain? And how can we improve our healthcare system in this country?
So one is that I didn't donate money, I invested. I've told you that there will be shortage of nurses and midwives in the next 10 years. So if the country is serious, it is a very cheap thing to do, and the money is there. We can decide to have one school of nursing, school of midwifery, school of technology, one per senatorial zone. It's only just about 100. It won't cost us more than maybe 500 million to establish these schools I'm talking. And it's as simple as ABC. You have said you're going to give people who are bringing dollar, for every $1, five naira. So if they bring $25 billion, you're going to invest 125 billion in servicing them. If you spend 550 billion of this, you have 100 new schools of nursing, midwifery, and health technology that can give you 300 graduates every year. Imagine if for 10 years you see the number of people you're going to get. From those 100, you're going to create enough to compete. In terms of brain drain, let me tell you, all you need is to invest more in education. There's no brain drain. These people are people who came out of school, they are not employed. Those who are employed are not paid or paid well. And then they're looking for where they will be able to earn a better living. I'm even shocked that somebody is trying to stop them. We should invest and educate and produce more doctors. Allow those that will leave to go out to be able to earn the foreign exchange we are looking for, and then the ones that are here to be paid well. So, a counselor in Nigeria earns more money than a professor of medicine in Nigeria. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. This is the only place in the world a lecturer is not paid. But then you hear that a House of Assembly member is buying cars and dashing to people, and they say he's doing well. Where did he get the money from? So our priority is wrong. That's why people are leaving. There's nothing called brain drain. I was telling somebody who wrote a nice book this morning and came to my house. I said, nobody will recognize you. If you write this book somewhere else, you'll be something of different. Even you, Sharon, for the job you do, if you do it outside here, you will be more recognized. But here, I can tell that if you go to your village, if a councillor comes, they might tell you to stand up to welcome him.
So, I mean, we're talking about earlier on issue of education as one of the areas you mentioned of getting Nigerians out of poverty. I mean, the issue of unemployment, it's double figure now. And How do we stem that tide and the growth of the unemployment? It's scary the way and manner in which it's going. But the solution is key here. Just in about a minute. How do we fix that?
So the more you invest in education, the better your economy. This is known everywhere. Your growth of your economy is dependent on education. The three measures of development, HDI, revolves around the education, because life expectancy, education, and pulling people out of poverty. The more people are educated, especially today when education is the new oil. The new oil is human resource, proper human resource. I just said it that Egypt, I'm not going out of Egypt now generates more money in terms of diaspora remittances and even FDI than Nigeria, because they have better educated people. Same thing is happening in Ghana. Just our neighbors here. I'm not going outside now to tell you what. I'm just using these two countries to show you what is happening. Egypt is now getting over 30 billion diaspora remittances. Egypt is now become a medical tourism center, and similar things happening in Ghana. Nigerians are going to educate their children in Ghana, and Ghana is receiving a lot of FDI because they will tell you they have educated, skilled labor, everything better than Nigeria. All this banditry you're seeing all over the place, if you educate your people, you will reduce it. Because today somebody can stay in Nigeria and be employed anywhere in the world. That's what is driving India. They've put in money in educating their people, especially in technology. And today, Indians are all over the place running technological companies, and in India doing everything to support companies.
All right. Yeah. Governor,
look at the amount of money tech companies are raising. All these young boys in tech are raising.
I'm being told you just have a minute to go. But let me take you up on a minute of politics, not more than that, just 60 seconds of politics. 2023, are you running for president?
You see, Shehu, let us not be preoccupied by 2023. Let's deal with this country first. Shehu, there's 7,000 schools that are closed in North. The entire Zamfara state, nobody is going to school. And you're talking about the election. We are preoccupied by issues that should take back seat. Does it make a difference if I'm running or not running? Would that make schools to open in Zamfara? Would that make schools shut down in the North, all over the place? Will it reduce the security? Will it bring about peace? Will cohesion be better in Nigeria if I'm running? These are issues that are capital. No. Let's focus on pulling this country out of this present position. Let's focus on about creating jobs. Let's focus on pulling people out of poverty and putting food on their table. Let's focus about their health care. Forget about who is president, who is this, who is that. We are consumed by this sharing mentality.
Former Governor Peter Obi and the former vice presidential candidate of the PDP. I wish I could take you up on that, because a lot of Nigerians will want to know, especially now that people are talking about whether or not the presidency should go to your region, the Southeast. But I must sincerely thank you for your time. I guess we'll do that some other time when we have you on. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
We have every reason to. Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Let's switch gears now and bring on Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, a former minority leader in the House of Representatives. He joins us from Benin Kudu in Jigawa State. He's an APC chieftain. Thank you so much, Honorable, and it's good to see you again. Let me begin the conversation. It's something that a lot of Nigerians have been talking about: fiscal federalism. How we can ensure that the constituent units function effectively. Do you think that this VAT matter has raised that issue? And where do you think we should go? What's your view on this VAT matter that Lagos State and Rivers State have brought on and taken to court?
Well, good evening, Nigeria. You see, my take on this, it's really sad that some states have taken upon themselves as if they are a country within themselves. And it's sad. As all these things, to me, they need political solution. Absolutely. Thank God, this VAT we're talking about is not in the Constitution. You know, it's a law that can easily be done in a political manner. You see, when the kind of tension we have in this country, the kind of problems we have, so I think collectively we need to look at ourselves as a country. Now, if you listen to some comments from Rivers and also from Lagos, forgetting the fact that, look, we are a country governed by law, and some of the things that were done in Lagos in particular, my colleagues in the State Assembly, and of course assented by the government. You know, it's really shocking to me that Lagos State will forget the fact that some of the things they are talking about is not within their view, because like ports are exclusively of federal government. So how can Lagos State get this thing through? I don't know. So when these things are done in a political manner, but to me, I think politics is coming to play now. I think the states are rushing to do these things, just overhit the polity. And look, who is going to suffer? All of us Nigerians. Because with this kind of regime, which means each state will come out with its VAT resolution, VAT programs. So who is going to suffer? We Nigerians, all of us, collectively. And nobody is going to be safe with it. So the earlier the political class come together and look at it in an equitable manner, justly, so that each state of the country will find solution to it. And so look, why are we looking like federal government is different from, you know, like state and federal? We are all one country. And the federal government has a responsibility, also certain things that is exclusively for federal government. The state also have their own. So if we come as a team, and thank God we have the National Economic Council, which I think with this brouhaha all over the place, I'm sure they're going to call for a meeting so that these things will be discussed. And thank God the Court of Appeal has, I think, come to the rescue, at least to say status quo should be maintained. So probably all politicians will come around the table and talk about it and probably come out with the solution.
Can you break it down more for us to understand? Because we need to understand your thought and how you're saying this matter. When you say that they are overheating the polity, how do you mean? Are you saying that the state governments don't have the right to challenge what they think is right or wrong? For example, we're seeing in the the time of Senator Bola Tinubu, will challenge the Obasanjo administration of the federal government then of the powers of the state to create local council LCDAs, which some other states have now done. Osun State have gone in that direction. Ekiti State have gone in that direction. Are you saying as constituent unit they don't have the right to interpret the law and go to the Supreme Court or go to the court to say, let's get the interpretation of this where we think that there's no equity in the distribution of wealth?
No, you see, all the states have rights to, take federal government to court. That's within their right to do that. But then sometimes you go to ask for interpretation that will probably overhit the polity. Let me talk about this VAT issue. Now, forgetting the fact that, look, Lagos State, where we have the biggest port in this country, where everybody imports from that part of the country. Also, Lagos State houses virtually the headquarters of all the companies in this country. And I'm sure it was political solution and also convenience solution that was thought about when this VAT issue came about. That was why if I in Birnin here use my MTN to make a call, the benefit go to Lagos. It doesn't make sense. But then look, if that is what will bring, justice in court, whereby it will be much easier for calculations in this kind of thing. Because otherwise, if we go the Lagos way or the Rivers way, which means if I am sending cows from Jigawa here, or I'm sending grains from Jigawa, probably Jigawa state government will put up a checkpoint, pay me my VAT here. When you go to Kano, out up to the end of the country, which means who is going to suffer? So that's why I'm saying these things need political solution. These things, of course, they have the right to go to court. They can go to court, but I'm telling you, overheating the polity in such, and that's why we're operating federalism, federating units, one state to help the other to to cushion the effects of one another, because we are operating a constitution that is called Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And still the Constitution has also guaranteed in the Constitution. You have like derivation, you have states that are producing the minerals to get more than other shares from than other states. So these kind of things is give and take. But if some states, it's their right, but I'm telling you, things are going to go higher because the states need revenues. And I think as at now, the best thing is for the political class to come and sit together, because look, now the courts have stopped the process, and which means Lagos might not be happy with it. Why can't they talk over among themselves to come about equitable solution to this problem? But going to court, yes, they can go to court, but I'm telling you that will not give the solution.
But let's look at it, and Elijah, you heard what former Governor Peter Obi said, and the manner in which the economy is being handled. He said, don't gloat, don't be too happy with the GDP growth. He's talking about revenue and revenue and revenue, and for us to produce more and more. It was particular about the manner in which the debt servicing and the borrowings under this government has gone. Let me get your view on what he said in that.
Well, I remember very well you asked him about what do you mean by borrowing to service, for servicing, for consumption, and he didn't answer well. We in this time around, we borrow to pay existing debt and also to pay for not services, to pay for products that can be seen, to pay for infrastructure, to pay for the educational system, to pay for so many things that are seen live in this country. So we're not borrowing to go and pay salaries. No, the government pays, borrows to put railway in the country, airports, agricultural sector, and what have you. So these are things that will boost the economy of the country, so the GDP will come back to the right numbers we want.
So, but how do you convince Nigerians on the manner in which the economy is being handled? Because on one hand, GDP growth of 5%, and people will say, oh, we've not really seen it on the food on the table, the quality of the food on the table, and the money in the pockets of the average man on the street.
Well, convince Nigerians in such a way that, look, if no matter what anybody says, there is a lot of growth in the agricultural sector. People are growing a lot of food, so people are making money through agriculture. Through agriculture, if you find all the indices are showing that there's a lot of growth in the agricultural sector in this country. More people have gone back to the farm, so more people are getting more money now than it used to be. So small by small, little by little, we're going to take a lot of people out of poverty. And that's exactly what's happening now. You could see also the massive infrastructural development that is going on. More people are employed, companies are working, things are happening. The economy is moving, of course, not the way we want, because of general situation in the whole world, whereby COVID, no matter what anybody says about it, this COVID has touched virtually every country in this world. Nigeria is not an island.
Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, it's always a pleasure for you breaking down this to us each time you're on the program. But most sincerely, thank you for coming on tonight. Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, a former minority leader in the House of Reps from Benin Kudu. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And just before we go, Nigeria, my lovely country, under my final word tonight, the giant of Africa, that's undoubted, We are big in size, check. We are the most populous, check. In fact, the largest economy by GDP per capita, also check. The continent of Africa's biggest big brother. Well, but all that was put to test in the year 2020 when coronavirus struck. The world was scrambling to unravel the scourge. Some countries of the world swiftly started seeking solutions, cure to the disease that was on rampage, killing whoever it pounces on. The lucky one, I say, survived. Sadly, we lost so many people. The Africa's big brother tried containing the virus. It was overwhelming. COVID-19 exposed our healthcare system. We simply got our begging bowls seeking like other countries' help in unraveling the riddle. Vaccines, vaccines, and vaccines. That is what the world is resorting into. But the Africa big brother does not have the capacity. The sad reality is that we have been slipping too deep to think of investing in that area. For such a task, which requires deep research, patenting and licensing, those critical elements, Nigeria simply lacks the facility to develop vaccines locally at the moment. An expert recently said it will take about 3 years for Nigeria to produce a COVID vaccine locally if there was an existing portal, protocol, infrastructure, and the structure. It is unclear if the Yaba Vaccine Production Laboratory in Lagos is still functional. Some will say Nigeria could produce vaccines years ago, but what has happened? Like in most aspects of life, Nigeria as well as most countries of Africa will have to wait for the West to be able to stay alive in the face of a deadly pandemic. Like a former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown said in an article recently, he said, and I quote, "Hoarding of vaccines by wealthy Western nations will result in thousands of needless deaths from COVID-19 in the world's poorest countries every month unless urgent steps are taken to distribute jabs more fairly." End of quote. If the bigger nations decided to hoard, there is a problem. For us to buy, if push comes to shove, that might be another challenge. We must rise up as a people and take some of these things seriously. Nigeria has loads of institutions that could be used, like the Nigeria Institute of Medical Research, some of the institutions that are now badly funded. Research from research and education institutions are hardly taken seriously. Facilities are not developed. Sincere investment needs to be considered urgently. We should not wait for another pandemic for us to act. Any serious nation will take these things seriously. We can no longer be a begging nation at the mercy of the so-called big nations. The time to get serious is now. And that is my final word tonight. Many thanks everyone for watching. I'm Sean Kimbale. Enjoy the rest of your evening.